Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Reading Corner. I'm your host Renee, and I am here for you every Wednesday reading stories in the public domain. We are currently reading through Sweeny, Todd and the String of Pearls. Today we'll be starting with chapter 11. So if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, I would highly recommend you go back and do that first. The book is pretty interesting, it's pretty entertaining. But before we begin today, I just have a couple of announcements to get through. Firstly, I will be taking a break in December. The Reading Corner will be posted as per usual until the 17th, but there will be no D&D episode or the short story episode in December, just for the holidays and to take a break. But otherwise, that's it. So let's get into it. Chapter 11, The Stranger at Lovetts. Towards the dusk of the evening of that day, after the last batch of pies at Lovetts had been disposed of, there walked into the shop a man most miserably clad, and who stood for a few moments staring with weakness and hunger at the counter before he spoke. Mrs. Lovett was there, but she had no smile for him, and instead of its usual bland expression, her countenance wore an aspect of anger, as she forestalled what the man had to say by exclaiming, "Go away! We never give anything to beggars!" There came a flush of color for the moment across the features of the stranger, and then he replied, "Mistress Lovett, I do not come to ask alms of you, but to know if you can recommend me to any employment." "Recommend you? Recommend a ragged wretch like you?" "I am a ragged wretch, and moreover quite destitute. In better times I have sat at your counter and paid cheerfully for what I wanted. And then one of your softest smiles has ever been at my disposal. I do not say this as a reproach to you, because the cause of your smile was well known to be a self-interested one. And when that cause had passed away, I can no longer expect it. But I am so situated that I am willing to do anything for a mere subsistence." "Oh yes, and then when you get into a better case, I have no doubt but you have quite sufficient insolence to make you unbearable. Besides, what employment can we have but pie-making? And we have a man already who suits us very well, with the exception that he, as you would do if we were to exchange with him, has grown insolent, and fancies himself the master of the place." "Well, well," said the stranger, "of course there is always sufficient argument against the poor and destitute to keep them so. If you will assert that my conduct will be the nature you describe, it is quite impossible for me to prove the contrary." He turned, and was about to leave the shop, but Mrs. Lovett called after him, saying, "Come again in 2 hours." He paused a moment or two, and then, turning his emaciated countenance upon her, said, "I will, if my strength permits me. Water from the pumps in the street is but a poor thing for a man to subsist upon for 24 hours. "You may take 1 pie." The half-famished, miserable-looking man seized upon a pie and devoured it in an instant. "My name," he said, "is Jarvis Williams. I'll be here, never fear, Mrs. Lovett, in 2 hours. And notwithstanding all you have said, you shall find no change in my behavior, because I may be well kept and better clothed, but if I should feel dissatisfied with my situation, I will leave it, and no harm done." So saying, he walked from the shop, and when he was gone, a strange expression came across the countenance of Mrs. Lovett, and she said in a low tone to herself, "He might suit for a few months, like the rest, and it is clear that we must get rid of the one we have. I must think of it." There is a cellar of vast extent, and of dim and sepulchral aspect. Some rough red tiles are laid upon the floor, and pieces of flint and large jagged stones have been hammered into the earthen walls to strengthen them, while here and there rough, huge pillars made by beams of timber rise perpendicularly from the floor and prop large flat pieces of wood against the ceiling to support it. Here and there gleaming lights seem to be peeping out from furnaces, and there is a strange hissing, simmering sound going on, while the whole air is impregnated with a rich and savory vapor. This is Lovetts' pie manufactory, beneath the pavement of Bell Yard, and at this time a night batch of some thousands is being made for the purpose of being sent by carts the first thing in the morning all over the suburbs of London. By the earliest dawn of day, a crowd of itinerant hawkers of pies would make their appearance, carrying off a large quantity to regular customers who had them daily, and no more thought of being without them than of forbidding the milkman or the baker to call at their residences. It will be seen and understood, therefore, that the retail part of Mrs. Lovetts' business, which took place principally between the hours of 12 and 1, was by no means the most important or profitable portion of a concern which was really of immense magnitude, and which brought in a large yearly income. To stand in the cellar when this immense manufacture of what, at first sight, would appear such a trivial article was carried on, and to look about as far as the eye could reach, was by no means to have a sufficient idea of the extent of the place. For there were as many doors in different directions, and singular low-arched entrances to different vaults, which all appeared as black as midnight, that one might almost suppose the inhabitants of all the surrounding neighbourhood had, by common consent, given up their cellars to Lovetts' pie factory. There is but one miserable light, except the occasional fitful glare that comes from the ovens where the pies are stewing, hissing, and spluttering in their own luscious gravy. There is but one man, too, throughout all the place, and he is sitting on a low three-legged stool in one corner, with his head resting upon his hands, and gently rocking to and fro as he utters scarcely audible moans. He is but lightly clad. In fact, he seems to have but little on him except a shirt and a pair of loose canvas trousers. The sleeves of the former are turned up beyond his elbows, and on his head he has a white nightcap. It seems astonishing that such a man, even with the assistance of Mrs. Lovett, could make so many pies as are required in a day. But then the system does wonders, and in those cellars there are various mechanical contrivances for kneading the dough, chopping up the meat, etc., which greatly reduce the labor. But what a miserable object is this man! What a sad and soul-stricken wretch he looks! His face is pale and haggard, his eyes deeply sunken, and as he removes his hands from before his visage and looks about him, a more perfect picture of horror could not have been found. "I must leave tonight," he said in coarse accents. "I must leave tonight. I know too much. My brain is full of horrors. I have not slept now for 5 nights, nor dare I eat anything but the raw flour. I will leave tonight, if they do not watch me too closely. Oh, if I could but get into the streets, if I could but once again breathe the fresh air. Hush, what's that? I thought I heard a noise." He rose and stood trembling and listening, but all was still, save the simmering and hissing of the pies. And then he resumed his seat with a deep sigh. "All the doors fastened upon me," he said. "What can it mean? It's very horrible, and my heart dies within me. 6 weeks only have I been here, only 6 weeks. I was starving before I came. Alas, alas, how much better to have starved. I should have been dead before now, and spared all this agony." "Skinner!" cried a voice, and it was a female one. "Skinner, how long will the ovens be?" "A quarter of an hour," he replied. "Quarter of an hour, Mrs. Lovett. God help me." "What is that you say?" "I said God help me. Surely a man may say that without offence." A door slammed shut, and the miserable man was alone again. "How strangely," he said, "on this night my thoughts go back to early days, to what I once was. The pleasant scenes of my youth recur to me. I see again the ivy-mantled porch and the pleasant village green. I hear again the merry ring and laughter of my playmates, and there, in my mind's eye, appears to me the bubbling stream and the ancient mill, the old mansion's house with its tall turrets and its air of silent grandeur. I hear the music of the birds, and the winds making rough melody among the trees. 'Tis very strange that all these sights and sounds should come back to me at such a time as this, as if just to remind me what a wretch I am." He was silent for a few moments, during which he trembled with emotion. Then he spoke again, saying, "Thus the forms of those whom I once knew, and many of whom have gone already to the silent tomb, appear to come thronging round me. They bend their eyes momentarily upon me, and with settled expressions show acutely the sympathy they feel for me. I see her too, who first in my bosom lit up the flame of soft affection. I see her gliding past me, like the dim vision of a dream, indistinct, beautiful, no more than a shadow, and yet to me most palpable. What am I now? What am I now?" He resumed his former position, with his head resting upon his hands. He rocked himself slowly to and fro, uttering those moans of a tortured spirit which we have before noticed. But see, one of the small arched doors opens in the gloom of those vaults, and a man in a stooping posture creeps in. A half mask is upon his face, and he wears a cloak. But both his hands are at liberty. In one of them he carries a double-headed hammer with a powerful handle of about 10 inches in length. He has probably come out of a darker place than the one into which he now so cautiously creeps, for he shades the light from his eyes as if it were suddenly rather too much for him. And then he looks cautiously round the vault until he sees the crouched-up figure of the man whose duty it is to attend to the ovens. From that moment he looks at nothing else, but advances toward him steadily and cautiously. It is evident that great secrecy is his object, for he is walking on his stocking soles only, and it is impossible to hear the slightest sound of his footsteps. Nearer and nearer he comes, so slowly and yet so surely towards him, who still keeps up the low moaning sound, indicative of mental anguish. Now he is close to him, and he bends over him for a moment with a look of fiendish malice. It is a look which, despite his mask, glances full from his eyes. And then, grasping the hammer tightly in both hands, he raises it slowly above his head, and gives it a swinging motion through the air. There is no knowing what induced the man that was crouching on the stool to rise at that moment, but he did so, and paced about with great quickness. A sudden shriek burst from his lips as he beheld so terrific an apparition before him. But before he could repeat the word, the hammer descended, crushing into his skull, and he fell lifeless without a moan. "And so, Mr. Jarvis Williams, you have kept your word," said Mrs. Lovett to the emaciated, careworn stranger who had solicited employment of her. "And so, Jarvis Williams, you have kept your word and come for employment." "I have, madame, and hope that you can give it to me. I frankly tell you that I would seek for something better and more congenial to my disposition if I could. But who would employ one presenting such a wretched appearance as I do? You see that I am all in rags, and I have told you that I have been half-starved, and therefore it is only some common and ordinary employment that I can hope to get, and that made me come to you." "Well, I don't see why we should not make a trial of you at all events. So, if you like to go down into the bakehouse, I will follow you and show you what you will have to do. You remember that you have to live entirely upon the pies, unless you like to purchase for yourself anything else, which you may do if you can get the money. We give none, and you must likewise agree never to leave the bakehouse." "Never to leave it?" "Never, unless you leave it for good and for all. If upon those conditions you choose to accept the situation, you may, and if not, you can go about your business at once and leave it alone." "Alas, madame, I have no resource, but you spoke of having a man already." "Yes, but he is gone to some of his very oldest friends, who will be quite glad to see him. So now say the word. Are you willing or are you not to take the situation?" "My poverty and my destitution consent, if my will be averse, Mrs. Lovett. But of course I quite understand that I leave when I please." "Oh, of course. We never think of keeping anybody many hours after they begin to feel uncomfortable. If you be ready, follow me." "I am quite ready, and thankful for a shelter. All the brightest visions of my early life have long since faded away, and it matters little, or indeed nothing, what now becomes of me. I will follow you, madame, freely, upon the conditions you have mentioned." Mrs. Lovett lifted up a portion of the counter which permitted him to pass behind it, and then he followed her into a small room which was at the back of the shop. She then took a key from her pocket and opened an old door which was in the wainscoting, and immediately behind which was a flight of stairs. These she descended, and Jarvis Williams followed her to a considerable depth, after which she took an iron bar from behind another door and flung it open, showing her new assistant the interior of the vault which we have already very briefly described. "These," she said, "are the ovens, and I will proceed to show you how you can manufacture the pies, feed the furnaces, and make yourself generally useful. Flour will always be let down through a trapdoor from the upper shop, as well as everything required for making the pies, but the meat, and that you will always find ranged upon shelves, either in lumps or sticks, in a small room through this door. But it is only at particular times you will find the door open, and whenever you do so, you had better always take out what meat you think you will require for the next batch." "I understand all that, madam," said Williams, "but how does it get there?" "That is no business of yours, so long as you are supplied with it, and that is sufficient for you. And now I will go through the process of making one pie, so that you may know how to proceed, and you will find with what amazing quickness they can be manufactured if you set about them in the proper manner." She then showed him how a piece of meat thrown into a machine became finely minced up by merely turning a handle, and then how water and flour and lard were mixed up together to make the crusts of the pies by another machine, which threw out the paste, thus manufactured in small pieces, each just large enough for a pie. Lastly, she showed him how a tray, which just held 100, could be filled, and by turning a windlass sent up to the shop through a square trap door, which went right up to the very counter. "And now," she said, "I must leave you. As long as you are industrious, you will get on very well. But as soon as you begin to be idle and neglect the orders that are sent to you by me, you will get a piece of information which will be useful, and which, if you are a prudent man, will enable you to know what you are about." "What is that? You may as well give it to me now." "No, we but seldom find there is occasion for it at first, but after a time, when you get well fed, you are pretty sure to want it." So saying, she left the place, and he heard the door by which he had entered carefully barred after her. Suddenly, then, he heard her voice again, and so clearly and distinctly, too, that he thought she must have come back again. But upon looking up at the door, he found that arose from the fact of her speaking through a small grating at the upper part of it, to which her mouth was closely placed. "Remember your duty," she said, "and I warn you that any attempt to leave here will be as futile as it will be dangerous." "Except with your consent, when I relinquish the situation." "Oh, certainly, certainly. You are quite right there. Everybody who relinquishes the situation goes to his old friends, whom he has not seen for many years, perhaps." "What a strange manner of talking she has." said Jarvis Williams to himself, when he found he was alone. There seems to be some singular and hidden meaning in every word she utters. What can she mean by a communication being made to me if I neglect my duty? It is very strange, and what a singular-looking place this is. I think it would be quite unbearable if it were not for the delicious odor of the pies, and they are indeed delicious, perhaps more delicious to me, who has been famished so long, and have gone through so much wretchedness. There is no one here but myself. And I am hungry now, frightfully hungry, and whether the pies be done or not, I'll have 6 of them at any rate. So here goes. He opened one of the ovens, and the fragrant steam that came out was perfectly delicious, and he sniffed it up with a satisfaction such as he had never felt before as regards anything that was eatable. "Is it possible," he said, "that I shall be able to make such delicious pies? At all events, one can't starve here, and if it is a kind of imprisonment, it's a pleasant one. Upon my soul, they are nice, even half-cooked, delicious. I can't keep the gravy from running out of the corners of my mouth. Upon my soul, Mrs. Lovett, I don't know where you get your meat, but it's all as tender as young chickens, and the fat actually melts away in one's mouth. Ah, these are pies, something like pies. They are positively fit for the gods." Mrs. Lovett's new man ate 12 3-penny pies, and then he thought of leaving off. It was a little drawback not to have anything to wash them down with but cold water, but he reconciled himself to this. For, as he said, after all, it would be a pity to take the flavour of such pies out of one's mouth. Indeed, it would be 1,000 pities, so I won't think of it, but just put up with what I have got and not complain. I might have gone further and fared worse with a vengeance, and I cannot help looking upon it as a singular piece of good fortune that made me think of coming here in my deep distress to try and get something to do. I have no friends and no money. She whom I loved is faithless, and here I am, master of as many pies as I like, and to all appearance monarch of all I survey, for there really seems to be no one to dispute my supremacy. To be sure, my kingdom is rather a gloomy one, but then I can abdicate it when I like, and when I am tired of those delicious pies, if such a thing be possible, which I really very much doubt, I can give up my situation and think of something else. If I do that, I will leave England forever. It's no place for me after the many disappointments I have had. No friend left me, my girl false, not a relation but who would turn his back upon me. I will go somewhere where I am unknown and can form new connections, and perhaps make new friendships of a more permanent and stable character than the old ones, which have all proved so false to me. And in the meantime, I'll make and eat pies as fast as I can. Chapter 12. The Resolution Come To, by Johanna Oakley. The beautiful Johanna, when in obedience to the command of her father she left him, and begged him, the beef-eater, to manage matters with the Reverend Mr. Lupin, did not proceed directly upstairs to her apartment, but lingered on the staircase to hear what ensued. And if anything in her dejected state of mind could have given her amusement, it would certainly have been the way in which the beef-eater exacted a retribution from the reverend personage, who was not likely again to intrude himself into the house of the spectacle-maker. But when he was gone, and she heard that a sort of peace had been patched up with her mother, a peace which, from her knowledge of the high contracting parties, she conjectured would not last long, she returned to her room and locked herself in, so that if any attempt was made to get her down to partake of the supper, it might be supposed she was asleep, for she felt herself totally unequal to the task of making one in any party, however much she might respect the individual members that composed it. And she did respect Ben the beef-eater, for she had a lively recollection of much kindness from him during her early years. and she knew that he had never come to the house when she was a child without bringing her some token of his regard, in the shape of a plaything or some little article of doll's finery, which at that time was very precious. She was not wrong in her conjecture that Ben would make an attempt to get her downstairs, for her father came up at the beefeater's request and tapped at her door. She thought the best plan, as indeed it was, would be to make no answer, so that the old spectacle-maker concluded at once what she wished him to conclude, namely, that she had gone to sleep. And he walked quietly down the stairs again, glad that he had not disturbed her, and told Ben as much. Now, feeling herself quite secure from interruption for the night, Johanna did not attempt to seek repose, but set herself seriously to reflect upon what had happened. She almost repeated to herself, word for word, what Colonel Geoffrey had told her, and as she revolved the matter over and over again in her brain, a strange thought took possession of her, which she could not banish, and which, when once it found a home within her breast, began to gather probability from every slight circumstance that was in any way connected with it. This thought, strange as it may appear, was that the Mr. Thornhill, of whom Colonel Geoffrey spoke in terms of such high eulogium, was no other than Mark Ingestry himself. It is astonishing, when once a thought occurs to the mind that makes a strong impression, how, with immense rapidity, a rush of evidence will appear to support it. And thus it was with regard to this supposition of Johanna Oakley. She immediately remembered a host of little things which favoured the idea, and among the rest she fully recollected that Mark Ingestry had told her he meant to change his name when he left England, for that he wished her, and her only, to know anything of him, or what had become of him, and that his intention was to baffle inquiry, in case it should be made, particularly by Mr. Grant, towards whom he felt a far greater amount of indignation than the circumstances at all warranted him in feeling. Then she recollected all that Colonel Geoffrey had said with regard to the gallant and noble conduct of this Mr. Thornhill, and, girl-like, she thought that those high and noble qualities could surely belong to no one but her own lover, to such an extent, and that therefore Mr. Thornhill and Mark Ingestry must be one and the same person. Over and over again she regretted she had not asked Colonel Geoffrey for a personal description of Mr. Thornhill, for that would have settled all her doubts at once, and the idea that she had it still in her power to do so, in consequence of the appointment he had made with her for that day week, brought her some consolation. "It must have been he," she said. "His anxiety to leave the ship and get here by the day he mentions proves it. Besides, how improbable it is that at the burning of the ill-fated vessel, Ingestry should place in the hands of another what he intended for me, when that other was quite as likely, if perhaps more so, to meet with death as Mark himself." Thus she reasoned, forcing herself each moment into a stronger belief of the identity of Thornhill with Mark Ingestry, and so certainly narrowing her anxieties to a consideration of the fate of one person instead of two. "I will meet Colonel Geoffrey," she said, "and ask him if this Mr. Thornhill had fair hair and a soft and pleasing expression about the eyes that could not fail to be remembered. I will ask him how he spoke and how he looked, and get him, if he can, to describe to me even the very tones of his voice, and then I shall be sure, without the shadow of a doubt, that it is Mark. But then, then comes the anxious question of what has been his fate." When poor Johanna began to consider the multitude of things that might have happened to her lover during his progress from Sweeny Todd's in Fleet Street to her father's house, she became quite lost in a perfect maze of conjecture. And then her thoughts always painfully reverted back to the barber shop where the dog had been stationed, and she trembled to reflect for a moment upon the frightful danger to which that string of pearls might have subjected him. "Alas, alas!" she cried. "I can well conceive that the man whom I saw attempting to poison the dog would be capable of any enormity. I saw his face but for a moment, and yet it was one never again to be forgotten. It was a face in which might be read cruelty and evil passions. Besides, the man who would put an unoffending animal to a cruel death shows an absence of feeling and a baseness of mind which makes him capable of any crime he thinks he can commit with impunity. What can I do? Oh, what can I do to unravel this mystery?" No one could have been more tenderly and gently brought up than Johanna Oakley, but yet inhabitive of her heart was a spirit and a determination which few indeed could have given her credit for by merely looking on the gentle and affectionate countenance which she ordinarily presented. But it is no new phenomenon in the history of the human heart to find that some of the most gentle and loveliest of human creatures are capable of the highest efforts of perversion. And when Johanna Oakley told herself, which she did, she was determined to devote her existence to the discovery of the mystery that enveloped the fate of Mark and Jestry, she likewise made up her mind that the most likely means for accomplishing that object should not be rejected by her on the score of danger, and she at once set to work considering what those means should be. This seemed an endless task, but still she thought that if by any means whatever she could get admittance to the Barrett house, she might be able to come to some conclusion as to whether or not it was there where Thornhill, whom she believed to be in Jestry, had been stayed in his progress. "Aid me, Heaven," she cried, "in the adoption of some means of action on the occasion. Is there any one with whom I dare advise? Alas, I fear not, for the only person in whom I have put my whole heart is my father, and his affection for me would prompt him at once to interpose every obstacle to my proceeding, for fear danger should come of it. To be sure, there is Arabella Wilmot, my old schoolfellow and bosom friend. She would advise me to the best of her ability, but I much fear she is too romantic and full of odd, strange notions that she has taken from books to be a good adviser. And yet what can I do? I must speak to someone, if it be but in case any accident happening to me, my father may get news of it, and I know of no one else whom I can trust but Arabella." After some little more consideration, Johanna made up her mind that on the following morning she would go to the house of her old school friend, which was in the immediate vicinity, and hold a conversation with her. "I shall hear something," she said, "at least of a kindly and consoling character. For what Arabella may want in calm and steady judgment, she fully compensates for in actual feeling. And what is most of all, I know I can trust her word implicitly, and that my secret will remain as safely locked in her breast as if it were in my own." It was something to come to a conclusion to ask advice, and she felt that some portion of her anxiety was lifted from her mind by the mere fact that she had made so firm a mental resolution, that neither danger nor difficulty should deter her from seeking to know the fate of her lover. She retired to rest now with a greater hope, and while she is courting repose, notwithstanding the chance of the discovered images that fancy may present to her in her slumbers, we will take a glance at the parlour below, and see how far Mrs. Oakley is conveying out the pacific intention she had so tacitly expressed, and how the supper is going forward, which, with not the best grace in the world, she is preparing for her husband, who, for the first time in his life, had begun to assert his rights, and for Big Ben, the beefeater, whom she as cordially disliked as it was possible for any woman to detest any man. Mrs. Oakley by no means preserved her taciturn demeanour, for after a little she spoke, saying, "There's nothing tasty in the house. Suppose I run over the way to Waggar's and get some of those Epping sausages with that peculiar flavour?" "Ah, do," said Mr. Oakley. "They are beautiful, Ben, I can assure you." "Well, I don't know," said Ben the beefeater. "Sausages are all very well in their way, but you need such a plagued lot of them. For if you only eat them one at a time, how soon will you get through a dozen or two?" "A dozen or two?" said Mrs. Oakley. "Why, there are only 5 to a pound." Then, said Ben, making a mental calculation, then I think, ma'am, that you ought not to get more than 9 pounds of them, and that will be a matter of 45 mouthfuls each. Get 9 pounds of them, said Mr. Oakley. If they are wanted, I know Ben has an appetite. Indeed, said Ben, but I have fell off lately, and don't take to my wittles as I used. You can order, missus, if you please, a gallon of half and half as you go along. One must have a drain of drink of some sort, and mind you don't be going to any expense on my account, and getting anything but the little snack I have mentioned. For 10 to 1 I shall take supper when I get to the Tower. Only human nature is weak, you know, missus, and requires something to be continually a-holding of it up. Certainly, said Mr. Oakley. Certainly. Have what you like, Ben. Just say the word before Mrs. Oakley goes out. Is there anything else? No, no, said Ben. Oh dear, no. Nothing to speak of. But if you should pass a shop where they sells fat bacon, about 4 or 5 pounds, cut into rashers, you'll find, missus, will help down the blessed sausages. Gracious Providence, said Mrs. Oakley. Who is to cook it? Who is to cook it, ma'am? Why, the kitchen fire, I suppose. But mind ye, if the man ain't got any sausages, there's a shop where they sells billed beef at the corner, and I shall be quite satisfied if you brings in about 10 or 12 pounds of that. You can make it up into about half a dozen sandwiches. Go, my dear, go at once, said Mr. Oakley, and get Ben his supper. I am quite sure he wants it, and be as quick as you can. Ah, said Ben, when Mrs. Oakley was gone. I didn't tell you how I was starved last week at Mrs. Harvey's. You know, they are so precious genteel there that they won't speak above their blessed breaths for fear of wearing themselves out. And they sits down in a chair as if it was balanced only on one leg, and a little more one way or t'other would upset them. Then, if they sees a crumb a-layin' on the floor, they rings a bell, and a poor half-starved devil of a servant comes out and says, Did you ring, ma'am? And then they says, Yes, bring a dust-shovel and a broom, there is a crumb a-layin' there. And then says I, Damn you all, says I, bring a scavenger's cart and a half-dozen birch brooms. There's a cinder just fell out of the fire. Then in course they gets shocked and looks as blue as possible, and arter that, when they sees I ain't a-goin', one of them says, Mr. Benjamin Bloomerguts, would you like to take a glass of wine? I should think so, says I. Then he says he, which would you prefer, red or white, says he. White, says I, while you are screwing up your courage to pull out the red. So out they pull it, and as soon as I got hold of the bottle, I knocked the neck of it off over the top bar of the fireplace, and then drank it all up. Now, damn ye, says I, you thinks all this is mighty genteel and fine, but I don't, and consider you to be the blessedest set of humbugs ever I set my eyes on, and if ever you catch me here again, I'll be genteel too, and I can't say more than that. Go to the devil, all of ye. So out I went, only I met with a little accident in the hall, for they had got a sort of lamp hanging there, and somehow or another my head went bang into it, and I carried it out round my neck. But when I did get out, I took it off, and shied it slap in at the parlour window. You never heard such a smash in all your life. I dare say they all fainted away for about a week, the blessed humbugs." "Well, I should not wonder," said Mr. Oakley. "I never go near them, because I don't like their foolish pomposity and pride, which upon very slender resources tries to ape what it don't at all understand. But here is Mrs. Oakley with the sausages, and I hope you will make yourself comfortable, Ben." "Comfortable? I believe ye I rather shall. I means it, and no mistake." "I have brought £3, said Mrs. Oakley, "and told the man to call in a quarter of an hour, in case there is more wanted." "The devil you have! And the bacon, Mrs. Oakley, the bacon." "I could not get any. The man had nothing but hams." "Lor, ma'am, I'd put up with a ham cut thick, and never have said a word about it. I am an angel of a temper, if you did but know it. Hurrah, look! Is that the fellow with the half and half?" "Yes, here it is, a pot." "A what?" "A pot, to be sure." "Well, I never. You are getting genteel, Mrs. Oakley. Then give us a hold of it." Ben took the pot and emptied it at a draught, and then he gave a tap at the bottom of it with his knuckles, to signify that he had accomplished the feat, and then he said, "I tells you what, ma'am, if you takes me for a baby, it's a great mistake, and anyone would think you did, to see you offering me a pot merely. It's an insult, ma'am." "Fiddle-dee-dee," said Mrs. Oakley. "It's a much greater insult to drink it all up and give nobody a drop." "Is it? I wants to know how you are to stop it, ma'am, when you gets it to your mouth. That's what I axes you. How are you to stop it, ma'am? You didn't want me to spew it back again, did you, ma'am?" "You vile, low wretch!" "Come, come, my dear," said Mr. Oakley. "You know our cousin. Ben don't live among the most refined society, and so you ought to be able to look over a little of his, I may say, I am sure without offence, roughness now and then. Come, come, there is no harm done, I'm sure. Forget and forgive, says I. That's my maxim, and has always been, and will always be." "Well," said the beefeater, "it's a good one to get through the world with, and so there's an end of it. I forgives you, Mother Oakley." "You forgive?" "Yes, to be sure, though I am only a beefeater, I supposes as I may forgive people for all that. Cousin Oakley?" "Of course, Ben, of course. Come, come, wife. You know as well as I that Ben has many good qualities, and that take him for all in all, as the man in the play says, we shan't be in a hurry to look upon his like again." "And I'm sure I don't want to look upon his like again," said Mrs. Oakley. "I'd rather by a good deal keep him a week than a fortnight. He's enough to breed a famine in the land, that he is." "Oh, bless you, no," said Ben. That's amongst your little mistakes, ma'am, I can assure you. By the by, what a blessed long time that fellow is coming with the rest of the beer and the other sausages. Why, what's the matter with you, Cousin Oakley, old chap? You look out of sorts. I don't feel just the thing, do you know, Ben? Not the thing. Why, now you come to mention it, I somehow feel as if all my blessed insides was on a turn and a twist. The devil, I don't feel comfortable at all. I don't. And I am getting very ill, gasped Mr. Oakley. And I'm getting iller, said the Beefeater, manufacturing a word for the occasion. Bless my soul, there's something gone wrong in my inside. I know there's murder, there's a go. Oh, Lord, it's doubling me up, it is. I feel as if my last hour had come, said Mr. Oakley. I'm a dying man, I am. Oh, good gracious, there was a twinge. Mrs. Oakley, with all the coolness in the world, took down her bonnet from behind the parlour door where it hung, and as she put it on, said, I told you both that some judgment would come over you, and now, you see, it has. How do you like it? Providence is good, of course, to its own, and I have... What? Poisoned the half and half. Big Ben, the Beefeater, fell off his chair with a deep groan, and poor Mr. Oakley sat glaring at his wife and shivering with apprehension, quite unable to speak, while she placed a shawl over her shoulders, as she added in the same tone of calmness she had made the terrific announcement concerning the poisoning. Now, you wretches, you see what a woman can do when she makes up her mind for vengeance. As long as you all live, you'll recollect me. But if you don't, that won't much matter, for you won't live long, I can tell you. And now I'm going to my sister's, Mrs. Tiddiblow. And so saying, Mrs. Oakley turned quickly round, and with an insulting toss of her head, and not at all caring for the pangs and sufferings of her poor victims, she left the place, and proceeded to her sister's house, where she slept as comfortably as if she had not by any means committed two diabolical murders. But has she done so, or shall we, for the honour of human nature, discover that she went to a neighbouring chemist's, and only purchased some dreadfully powerful medicinal compound, which she placed in the half and half, and which began to give those pangs to Big Ben the Beefeater and to Mr. Oakley, concerning which they were both so eloquent? This must have been the case, for Mrs. Oakley could not have been such a fiend in a human guise as to laugh as she passed the chemist's shop. Oh no, she might not have felt remorse, but that is a very different thing indeed from laughing at the matter, unless it were really laughable and not serious at all. Big Ben and Mr. Oakley must have at length found out how they had been hoaxed, and the most probable thing was that the before-mentioned chemist himself told them, for they sent for him in order to know if anything could be done to save their lives. Ben from that day forthwith made a determination that he would not visit Mr. Oakley, and the next time they met he said, I tell you what it is. That old hag, your wife, is one too many for us. That's a fact. She gets the better of me altogether. So, whenever you feels a little inclined for a gossip about old times, just you come down to the tower. I will, Ben. Do. We can always find something to drink, and you can amuse yourself, too, by looking at the animals. Remember, Feeding time is 2 o'clock, so now and then I shall expect to see you. And above all, be sure you let me know if that canting person, Lupin, comes any more to your house."
"I will, Ben."
"Ah, do, and I'll give him another lesson if he should, and I'll tell you how I'll do it. I'll get a free admission to the wild beastesses in the tower, and when he comes to see 'em, for them 'ere sort of fellows always go everywhere they can go for nothing, I'll just manage to pop him into a cage along some of the most cantankerous creatures as we have."
"But would that not be dangerous?"
"Oh dear, no. We has a laughing hyena as would frighten him out of his wits. But I don't think as he'd bite him much, do you know. He's as playful as a kitten, and very fond of standing on his head."
"Well then, Ben, I have, of course, no objection, although I do think that the lesson you have already given to the reverend gentleman will and ought to be fully sufficient for all purposes, and I don't expect we shall see him again."
"But how does Mrs. O. behave to you?" asked Ben.
"Well, Ben, I don't think there's much difference. Sometimes she's a little civil, and sometimes she ain't. It's just as she takes it into her head."
"Ah, that all comes of marrying."
"I have often wondered, though, Ben, that you never married."
Ben gave a chuckle as he replied,
"Have you, though, really?
"Well, Cousin Oakley, I don't mind telling you. But the real fact is, once I was very near being served out in that sort of way."
"Indeed?"
"Yes, I'll tell you how it was. There was a girl called Angelina Day, and a nice enough-looking creature she was, as you'd wish to see, and didn't seem as if she'd got any claws at all. Leastwise, she kept them in, like a cat at meal-times."
"Upon my word, Ben, you have a great knowledge of the world."
"I believe you I have. Haven't I been brought up among the wild beasts of the tower all my life? That's the place to get a knowledge of the world in, my boy. I ought to know a thing or two, and in course I does."
"Well, but how was it, Ben, that you did not marry this Angelina you speak of?"
"I'll tell you. She thought she had me as safe as a hare in a trap, and she was as amiable as a lump of cotton. You'd have thought, to look at her, that she did nothing but smile, and to hear her, that she said nothing but nice, mild, pleasant things. And I really began to think as I had found the proper sort of animal."
"But you were mistaken?"
"I believe you I was. One day I'd been there to see her, at her father's house, and she'd been as amiable as she could be. I got up to go away with a determination that the next time I got there I would ask her to say yes, and when I had got a little way out of the garden of the house where they lived, it was out of town some distance, I found I had left my little walking cane behind me, so I goes back to get it, and when I got into the garden, I heard a voice."
"Whose voice?"
"Why, Angelina's, to be sure. She was a-speaking to a poor little dab of a servant they had, and oh my eye,
How she did rap out, to be sure! Such a speech as I never heard in all my life. She went on a matter of 10 minutes without stopping, and every other word was some ill name or another. And her voice, oh gracious, it was like a bundle of wire all of a tangle, it was.
And what did you do then, upon making such a discovery as that in so very odd and unexpected a manner?
Do? What do you suppose I did?
I really cannot say, as you are rather an eccentric fellow.
Well, then, I'll tell you. I went up to the house, and just popped in my head, and says I, Angelina, I find out that all cats have claws after all. Good evening, and no more from your humble servant who don't mind the job of taming any wild animal but a woman. And then off I walked, and I never heard of her afterwards.
Ah, Ben, it's true enough. You never know them beforehand, but after a little time, as you say, then out come the claws.
They does.
And I suppose you since then made up your mind to be a bachelor for the rest of your life, Ben?
Of course I did. After such experience as that, I should have deserved all I got, and no mistake, I can tell you. And if ever you catches me paying any attention to a female woman, just put me in mind of Angelina Day, and you'll see how I shall be off at once like a shot.
Ah, said Mr. Oakley with a sigh. Everybody, Ben, ain't born with your good luck, I can tell you. You are a most fortunate man, Ben, and that's a fact. You must have been born under some lucky planet, I think, Ben, or else you never would have had such a warning as you have had about the claws. I found them out, Ben, but it was a deal too late, so I had only to put up with my fate and put the best face I could upon the matter.
Yes, that's what learned folks call, what's its name? Phil something.
Philosophy, I suppose you mean, Ben.
Ah, that's it. You must put up with what you can't help, it means, I take it. It's a fine name for saying you must grin and bear it.
I suppose that is about the truth, Ben.
It cannot, however, be exactly said that the little incident connected with Mr. Lupin had no good effect upon Mrs. Oakley, for it certainly shook, most alarmingly, her confidence in that pious individual. In the first place, it was quite clear that he shrank from the horrors of martyrdom, and indeed, to escape any bodily inconvenience, was perfectly willing to put up with any amount of degradation or humiliation that he could be subjected to, and that was, to the apprehension of Mrs. Oakley, a great departure from what a saint ought to be. Then again, her faith in the fact that Mr. Lupin was such a chosen morsel as he had represented himself was shaken from the circumstance that no miracle in the shape of a judgment had taken place to save him from the malevolence of Big Ben the Beefeater, so that, taking one thing in connection with another, Mrs. Oakley was not near so religious a character after that evening as she had been before it, and that was something gained. Then circumstances soon occurred, of which the reader will very shortly be fully aware, which were calculated to awaken all the feelings of Mrs. Oakley, if she had really any feelings to awaken, and to force her to make a common cause with her husband in an affair that touched him to the very soul, and did succeed in awakening some feelings in her heart that had lain dormant for a very long time, but which were still far from being completely destroyed.
These circumstances were closely connected with the fate of one in whom we hope that by this time the reader has taken a deep and kindly interest. We mean Johanna, that young and beautiful and artless creature who seemed to have been created to be so very happy, and yet whose fate had become so clouded by misfortune, and who appears now to be doomed through her best affections to suffer so great an amount of sorrow and to go through so many sad difficulties. Alas, poor Johanna Oakley! Better had you loved someone of less aspiring feelings and of less ardent imagination than him to whom you have given your heart's young affections. It is true that Mark and Jestry possessed genius, and perhaps it was the glorious light that hovers around that fatal gift which prompted you to love him. But genius is not only a blight and a desolation to its possessor, but it is so to all who are bound to the gifted being by the ties of fond affection. It brings with it that unhappy restlessness of intellect which is ever straining after the unattainable, and which is never content to know the end and ultimatum of earthly hopes and wishes. No, the whole life of such persons is spent in one long struggle for a fancied happiness, which, like the ignis fatuus of the swamp, glitters, but to betray those who trust to its delusive and flickering beams. And that is where we are going to leave it for today. Join me next time for chapter 13 and 14. And if you like what I'm doing here, please like, subscribe, hit that bell, check the button, get me out there, share me with all your friends. And I'll be seeing you guys next time. Bye!